Hey everyone, and welcome back to Dead Mall Walking. First off, my apologies for the clickbait, because this is not technically the only Toys R Us in the USA. But to my mind, it's alone in being the closest thing there is to a spiritual successor of the OG icon. I'll get to what I mean by that a little later in this video. When I stumbled across this place, tucked away in some random outlet mall in Texas, it was a huge surprise. I was all set to post something like, "Why did no one tell me that Toys R Us is back?" on my Instagram story with a gif of a shocked giraffe or something. A quick Google search later, I realised that it's because, in all likelihood, nobody really knows about it. The brand opened 2 flagship stores back in 2021 and 2022 in Minnesota's Mall of America and New Jersey's issue-ridden American Dream Mall. Although, to be fair, it does look like that store has a great entrance and frontage going on. The obvious choice for a third store? Why, the San Marcos outlets, just outside of Austin, of course. Inexplicably cut into 2 different outlet malls by a main road that takes forever and a day to actually get across. Because those other 2 flagships are located inside malls, they don't really have the same vibe as the original Toys R Us. Nor, to my mind, do the concessions inside Macy's, which we're taking a look at here. I don't think you can call it a Toys R Us if you can look to the left and see discounted mattresses or a soccer mom picking out a new thong. So, that leaves this place, the only freestanding Toys R Us in America. Well, if you want to get technical, it's attached to a block of restrooms on one side, so it's not fully freestanding, but just let me have this one, okay? And at the time of this video's filming, a second freestanding location was set to open at the Chicago Premium Outlets in Aurora, Illinois. It seems like the outlet mall model might be one that Toys R Us's new owners are planning to adopt. Which doesn't necessarily make a ton of sense to me because Toys R Us never really had a reputation for being all that cheap. Forgive me if this video feels a little disjointed. I tried to secure as much footage as I could in as short a space of time as possible. I didn't want to draw too much attention to myself, since a childless man in his 30s walking around a toy store with a camera isn't exactly the best look. The things I do for this channel. Still, it should give you an idea of what the store's interior looks like. Everything is pretty compact, but it's bright and colourful and presumably full of the type of thing kids like. I can only guess because, as I said, child-free man in his 30s here. It's not exactly on par with the Times Square flagship store, which closed about a decade ago, and its incredible indoor Ferris wheel. But there are some fun displays and quirky bits and pieces for kids to look at and hear. Like the chance to be a life-size Barbie doll. The True Kids brand is now owned by US-based WHP Global, and they're expanding pretty rapidly. Some might argue too rapidly. There are already stores in Spain, Portugal, Saudi Arabia, Singapore, and various other locations in Asia and beyond. There are almost 100 UK locations inside the store formerly known as WH Smith, which is now called TG Jones after a buyout deal not long after their partnership with Toys R Us began. Sort of makes you wonder if Jeffrey might be cursed. I visited one of the first WH Smith locations to open on this channel and wasn't particularly enamoured with it. But I will say that the consistency of the branding on both sides of the Atlantic is impressive. You probably couldn't tell at first glance that the store we're looking at right now and the one that's the main feature of this video are some 3,000 miles apart. Another positive for the San Marcos store is that there is actually some interactivity in the place. In amongst the walls of Funko Pops, there are displays to pose in, colouring books scattered around, and toys to roam around the store on. When I visited at the weekend, there was a Jeffrey mascot wandering around and taking pictures with the kids. Or if you'd rather, you can pretend to be a Funko Pop of Jeffrey in this big display, which honestly doesn't make a ton of sense to me. Maybe I'm overthinking it. Although this place isn't exactly tiny, I couldn't help but think that it felt so much smaller than the Toys R Us stores of the 90s, which always felt to me like sprawling warehouses filled with gadgets and gizmos. But maybe it's just that I'm bigger now. I did a little research and found that most of the old school stores were around 40 to 50,000 square feet, up to 70,000 if you throw in an adjoining Babies R Us. The American Dream flagship clocks in at just 20,000 square feet, with these smaller store concepts often around the 10,000 square foot mark. If this place feels a little cramped to you, like it did to me, it's because it's much, much smaller than the Toys R Us of our youth. I honestly felt like I was going to fall over something or someone every time I rounded a corner. America's Funniest Home Videos, here I come. I know what they mean here, but licensed girls is an absolutely diabolical phrase for a children's toy store. And don't ask how I got this shot inside this playhouse, because you don't want to know. It's worth pointing out that we've been here before. Not San Marcos, Texas, but an attempt to revive Toys R Us. In 2019, 2 Toys R Us stores opened in Westfield Garden State Plaza in New Jersey and the Galleria in Houston, Texas. What is it with Toys R Us and reopening in Texas? Those stores, which I personally think were only opened as a marketing stunt to relaunch the brand's website at the back end of that year, were both closed by 2021. Obviously the pandemic was probably a factor there. But by the end of 2022, there were more than 400 Toys R Us concessions, located inside every single Macy's in the USA. I like this little breakdown of the brand's history behind the counter here, which includes, among other things, every version of Jeffrey, right through to today's starry-necked flat design iteration. Toys R Us has announced plans to open 10 new flagship stores by the end of this year, and 20 holiday stores on top of that. Think Spirit Halloween, only with toys and Jeffrey in a Santa hat instead of Art the Clown. There's not much of 2025 left, so it's worth asking how that mission is going. So far, they've managed to open 3 of those flagships, at Great Lakes Crossing Outlets in Auburn Hills, Michigan, the Chicago Premium Outlets I mentioned earlier, and Grapevine Mills in Grapevine, of course, Texas. But will things be different for Toys R Us this time around? That's the big question. And unfortunately, I don't have an answer. The smaller footprint outlet mall model is an interesting idea, but that's not to say it'll actually work. Though it does at least make sense. Big box stores are closing left and right, with even quirky experiential spots like Fry's Electronics failing to survive. All in all, I just didn't feel the magic here. But is that really surprising? Despite all those protestations and promises to Jeffrey, I did indeed grow up and am no longer a Toys R Us kid. I'm not the target audience for this place, and that's okay. These days, at the outlet mall, I'm probably better suited to picking up a Tommy Bahama polo shirt or a clunky pair of Skechers. That's about all the footage I was able to get walking around here, so I'll wrap this one up. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. It's a big help. My Instagram and some ways to support what I do are linked below. Until next time, goodbye from Toys R Us in San Marcos, Texas.